state your first name.
Tony.
Please state what country you are representing.
I'm from Germany.
Feel free to give a few facts about your country.
So Germany is a country of about 82 million, and it's located in Central Europe, so in the heart of Europe really. So it's surrounded by a lot of other countries like Poland, Switzerland, Czech Republic, Belgium, the Netherlands, France of course, Denmark, and a few others.
Tell us a little about the family structure. Do multiple generations live together?
No, multiple generations family do not live together.
Who makes the rules?
Well, the parents do make the rules for sure.
How are they made?
Well, usually they hash out the decisions first, kind of. That's how it goes. It's kind of a little bit hierarchical. And then they may consult with others as well, with the children, what have you. But usually it starts with the parents, you know.
How are they? Okay. Where does the family gather for holidays?
So usually families gather with the grandparents, at least that was in my case. So every holidays, Easter, Christmas, what have you, we met at my grandparents' house, and they always had the Christmas time. They had the Christmas tree, of course, and we were singing, and then we had the presents and so forth. And then for Easter, kind of the similar thing. Or for St. Nicholas Day, which is December 6th, we usually went to my grandparents and celebrated there. But there are also instances where we had the gatherings at home with my parents. But most of the time, you know, the focus has always been, you know, go to the grandparents. So either my grandparents in the Saarland, which is a state in Germany, or to my grandparents in Bavaria, basically. That was generally the focal point of celebrating holidays.
Who would gather? Would people outside the family be invited?
No, generally not. It would be just the immediate family.
How are the elderly treated in your country?
With great respect, of course. Usually they're the ones to go to for advice, for guidance. And that respect is expected. It is also taught by the parents to really respect the elderly. After all, they have a lot of experience, life experience, and you know, that has always been one of the most important things that help the younger generation and to make better decisions. Now, that is my generation, so this may have changed a little bit with the younger generation nowadays, but that's my generation basically.
If you needed a job, how would you go about getting one in your country? Who might you ask for help?
So that's a good question. I guess you have to start looking at the educational system a little bit to answer this question. For one, you know, we have different tracks in Germany. And so we have one track that is kind of really focused on getting a job after you're done with school. So you're automatically right on that track after 9 years basically, or 10, to kind of get a job. If you go to school for 11, 12, 13 years, usually that's the track for the university or college basically. So then finding a job kind of works a little bit differently. Generally speaking, finding a job, you would go to an agency, basically, a state agency, the Department of Labor, basically. And the Department of Labor, they do have different branches across Germany. In each state, there are several, basically. And what you can do is basically go there, you make an appointment with somebody, of course, and then they would help you to basically look at the kind of skills you have and match them with a job, basically. Of course, you can also talk to your family. You know, many of them, of course, have businesses as well, what have you, and then find out if they do have anything for you as far as job. But that's not the general route or general route. The general kind of process really going through the state agency, finding a job. Nowadays, looking on the internet, of course, things like that for job openings, and in that way, you're trying to pursue and get a job.
If a teenager was to get in trouble at school for breaking a rule, what would happen?
Hmm.
Would they be punished at school, home, both? Who would know? Are the rules the same for everyone? Would it matter if their parents worked at the school?
All right, now let's take that one by one again. So the first question would be,
What would happen if a teenager was to get in trouble at school for breaking a rule?
well, in my days, usually the teacher would deal with you directly, basically. So that might mean, you have to stay a little bit longer, do some homework in school. Or in my days, I think they even kind of had this kind of punishment, if you will. They kind of put you in a corner, kind of more one-on-one, basically. And it also depends on the severity, of course. So usually it's dealt by the teacher. The teacher takes care of it with the student. But of course, there are also instances where the teacher would reach out to the parent and say, okay, your son, your daughter, what have you, have done this, so let's talk about this, and let's make sure this does not happen again.
Would they be punished at home?
So as I just said, they will be punished kind of in school, and there's a good chance that the parents would do something as well. So my experience, so I did a few things in school too, which were probably not appropriate. So my teacher kind of punished me a little bit, and then when my parents heard about it, they as well. So I had to stay home. So I couldn't go out. I couldn't go out and play with my friends, which
You were grounded?
I was grounded. Absolutely, I was grounded for a day, sometimes longer, and that hurt because all my friends, we were always playing outside. We wanted to play outside, so that probably was one of the most severe punishments one could get. There was no beating, at least not in my family. So that rarely happened. Rarely, It was more like going out for a day or two, what have you. That's usually what happened.
Are the rules the same for everyone?
From the teacher's perspective, yes. We were all treated equally, regardless of your background. Yes, of course, what happened at home, how the parents treated their children who did something wrong in school, I don't know. I'm sure there are varieties of approaches there as well, but basically in school, pretty much equal treatment as far as what kind of punishment it is, or sometimes there were cases where you had to see the oh my goodness, the person who is basically in charge of the school,
Principal?
the principal. Thank you very much. So sometimes you had to had the principal called you into his or her office basically and say, okay, what you have to stop this, things like that. So at school, I would say was pretty much equal treatment, absolutely.
Would it matter if their parent worked at the school?
No, would not matter.
Alright. Suppose you are busy in town getting groceries and other supplies and you run into an old friend. Would you stop and talk?
Absolutely.
For how long?
Oh, well, and that depends how close I was with that old friend. But generally, I certainly would talk about the old times, the good times, what have you, and that certainly would distract me from shopping for a while. But maybe that's just me. I always like to meet with my friends, talk to them, and there were many instances where I haven't seen somebody for several years, well, just months maybe, and we would catch up what had happened since we've seen each other the last time.
Would the to-do list or the friend be more important?
In that moment, the friend will be more important, absolutely. Not the to-do list. The to-do list can wait a little bit, It will get done. But meeting with a good friend, old friend, that's more important.
Are people generally friendly or do they keep to themselves?
Oh, that's an interesting question for a German, huh? I would say the Germans are more reserved. They probably keep to themselves a bit more. I mean, that's something I noticed when I came to the United States. Americans tend to be much more open. They are much more willing to share their life story with you, if you will. Germans don't do that. So in that sense, they're kind of more than themselves. But after, of course, some period of getting to know each other, and switching from the you to the more personal du in German, then of course it's pretty much the same relationship you would have with somebody here in America. It just takes a little bit longer in Germany to get to this stage.
Okay. Suppose you are on a sports team and they won a tournament. Who will get the credit for the win?
All of us. It's generally that's the case. It would be all of us. Those who, of course, performed really well during that game, of course, they would get their recognition as well. But German society, I think, is more a society that tries to give credit to as many people as possible. It has a more, how can I say this, a more sense of community, and that way the credit is kind of spread more equally, I would say, let's say compared to the United States. So it's, in that sense, it's a bit less individualistic, and hence credit is spread more across the group.
Do people in your country tend to plan ahead or focus more on the immediate?
Of course, I'm gonna now play with the German stereotype. We are planning ahead. I would say that's generally the rule. That's definitely the rule in my family, to plan ahead in advance, as much as you can. So pretty much, if I look at my family, they're all planners. Looking down the road 1, 2, 3 months down the road and what needs to be done. That's certainly, when I look at my mom, she is the big planner in the family, and I would say much of that kind of sense of planning I got from her, but it runs very deeply in my entire family, and I've seen it also with a lot of other Germans I've met, that planning is more kind of the way to go.
Is it okay to be late for a meeting in your country?
Absolutely not.
When would it be acceptable to be late?
Wow. I guess we all have sometimes emergency we have to deal with, so in cases like if something really terrible happened and you can explain it, that would be certainly acceptable. But generally being late would be almost like offending somebody, in a sense. It would be disrespectful.
Does it matter who you are, like a manager or a teacher or a janitor?
Absolutely not. That applies equally to everybody. Being late is viewed as something very negative.
If someone was offended in your country, would they tell the person who offended them or keep it to themselves?
Generally, I would say Germans are pretty direct, so they would tell you. They would tell you, absolutely. Of course, that again depends on their different personalities as well. So some might hold back and say something, but generally, a German would tell you if they are being offended.
If someone in your country disagreed with what an elder was saying, would they speak up or keep it to themselves?
It's a good question. So generally, opinions of the elders are very much respected. So they might say something very diplomatically, thereby expressing that they disagreeing with the opinion, but they would not kind of really loudly and in a disrespectful way of saying, okay, I do not agree with what you just said. So generally speaking, politeness, respecting opinions of the elderly is always one of the major priorities to follow as a general rule.
Do people in your country display a lot of emotion, laugh loudly in public, or cry in public?
No, absolutely not. Germans don't do that. As I said kind of before, we are more reserved, so that's something I notice in this country. Showing emotions, even with people you don't really know, just kind of the amount of hugging in this country, which is a display of emotions, right? That would not happen in Germany, not at that scale, basically. So I would say generally not. After a while, as you get to know somebody more closely, absolutely, that is the case, hugging and all of that. But again, it's not the default kind of approach.
Do people in your country tend to do one thing at a time or multiple things at once?
I think that depends. Again, generally I would say multitasking is certainly many do. But on the other hand, I would say Germans in general are also very focused on a given task, and they are so focused because they want to make sure to get it right and absolutely right. So I know a lot of Germans who are perfectionists, and hence they tend to focus on that task, complete it, move on to the next task. But again, that does not mean that they don't do multitasking. Many, of course, do, but they would spend more time on a given task to complete it, basically.
If I was talking to someone in your country and started texting at the same time, how would I be perceived?
Oh my God, I would not do this. It would be extremely impolite to do that. In Germany, when you talk to somebody, it's really important to keep the eye contact with that person and focus on what the other person is telling you, because you're kind of expecting the same thing from that person as well. So using devices that distract from a conversation, a meaningful conversation, would not be helpful and would be frowned upon.
What other information would you care to share?
Well, I would say, in general, Germans are actually very good to get along with, I would say. Once you get to know Germans more closely, after a while, they, like anybody else, just normal human beings who want to do the best. Thank you.